When I use black as my cell activator, why do I sometimes get cells and sometimes I don't? Unfortunately, that's a complicated answer. However, I want to show you with some concrete examples what things to look for in your paint and how you can potentially adjust it to get better results with cells. So to do this, I'm going to do 4 experiments with 4 different color black. What we're going to do is put a black base coat, add a little bit of flood of that same black, and pour it over 4 other colors. Now the colors I've decided to use here are from a kit that I bought from Amazon. These are my paints. I have titanium white, silver, pink, and permanent red. So when it comes to paints, one of the factors that affects whether you get cells or not are the densities of the different paints that you're using. So for these, based on the quality of the paint, it's kind of a low quality, better than craft, but lower quality than a student level acrylic, or equivalent to a student level acrylic. The titanium white's going to be heavy. The silver is going to be very light just because it has a lot of mica pigments in it to make it shiny. Pink is going to be kind of mid-level because the red is very light. So the red, the permanent red is very light. Pink is going to be a little bit of titanium white and a little bit of red, so it's going to be right in between. And for our 4 black colors that we're going to use Liquitex Basics. And this is ivory black. We're going to use Amsterdam acrylic oxide black. We're going to use Craftsmart black, just a craft paint, and then Creative Inspirations lamp black. Now the difference in these is this uses PBK 9, which is kind of a mid-level density of pigment. The oxide black uses a very heavy black pigment. The Creative Inspirations lamp black uses PBK 7, which is a lighter black pigment. And we don't know what pigment this gets used, but it is a very low quality pigment, so we're going to assume it's very thin. So when it comes to paints, there's a couple of different things that can affect whether you get cells or not. The paint brand, just the mix-ins and the things that are in the paint that we don't know about but get mixed into the different qualities of paint. There's the pigments, which we talked about. There's the consistency, and the sheen of the paint can also affect if I get cells or not. So in order to demonstrate this, we're going to do this experiment that I mentioned, do 4 different canvases with those 4 colors that I mentioned, and each of the different black, and then come back and see what the differences is between all of these. All right, so I went to record and realized that my paints were a little bit too thick, so I've thinned them down a little bit. So now they're barely making a mound and going away. It's a little bit thicker than like the Olga Sobe's, or a little bit thicker than Olga Sobe's mixture, but as you can see, I did another test and put a little bit more paint or a little bit more water in these ones just to make sure that they're all about the same consistency. So the easiest way to show this to you is to do a kind of a modified Dutch pour. So we're going to put a base of black, we're going to put the colors on, blow the black over the colors, and then kind of go from that point. So first one we're going to do is the Liquitex Basics ivory black. So we're going to pour most of that on here. A little bit more. We don't need a lot for the last piece. And just to make this go a little faster, I'm not worried about coverage, just because again we're using this as an example and a lesson learned. So it's 1 part paint, 2 parts of Flood Floetrol. The only paint I did not do that with is the Craftsmart. It's just too crappy of a paint. You can't dilute it that much. So this is 1 part paint, 1 part Floetrol, and then water added to consistency. So we're going to blow this out really quick. All right, so now we're going to put some paint on. Silver. The pink. I think I want to do red next. And then we're going to take a little bit of the black, put it right here. And then we're just going to rinse and repeat, and then I will bring them all together. So next is the Amsterdam oxide black. Next is the Creative Inspirations lamp black. Last but not least, we have Craftsmart black. And now we're going to let all of these sit for a little while, and we'll come back and discuss the results. All right, so it's been a few days and all of these paints have been able to dry. Again, I have the Liquitex Basics, the Amsterdam Oxide Black, the Craftsmart Black, and the Creative Inspirations Black. Now really quickly, I did mess up when I was doing the Craftsmart Black. You can kind of see it. See the black? Some of the black has a good sheen and some doesn't. I accidentally used a little bit of the Creative Inspirations Black while I was blowing this over. The Craftsmart Black actually blew through mostly, but you can see the dullness of that paint. So I don't think it affects the results of it, but that's why I have this weird dual sheen when it comes to that. So as I mentioned before, this is the heaviest paint. This is the second heaviest paint. This is the second lightest, and this is the lightest, based on pigment alone. Not quality of the paint can affect that also. And one thing I do want to show you is the sheen of the paints are all different. So I have the Liquitex Basics, Amsterdam Oxide Black, Creative Inspirations Lamp Black, Craftsmart Black. But look, if I get some shine on here, see how these two are, especially the Liquitex Basics is pretty matte. The Amsterdam is pretty matte, you know, satin really, not matte, because it does have a little bit of sheen. But look how shiny the Creative Inspirations is. And then the Craftsmart Black is just so bad. It just looks bad, even compared to all of these. It has absolutely no sheen. So The reason I bring this up is because the two paints that had kind of a satin sheen actually got the best sells. So we got quite a few sells here with the ivory black from Liquitex, and we got a ton of beautiful sells from the Amsterdam paint, which this shouldn't be surprising. If you've watched any videos, this is a go-to paint. The Amsterdam paints are go-to paints for cell creation. And again, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's a little bit matte. If you actually have a matte cell activator, I think it works better than most of the gloss or semi-gloss paints. Not always, but a lot of the time that's one of the things the levers you can pull is to look for a matte, higher quality paint. The other thing is, if you notice, none of the other colors really got very many cells. Now this kind of did. You see the pink kind of got some cells out there, and it kind of got some cells out there. But I think that's because the pink and the silver kind of mixed right there. Because as soon as I get into the just pink, I really don't get any cells. With the Craftsmart, I got none at all, other than bubbles that I popped with the torch. Creative Inspirations, same thing, none at all. So the levers you can pull when you're looking for a paint to create cells, the first important thing, to be bluntly honest, is look what other people have done and what they've had success with. It's not just the cell activator paint, but also the paint that you're going to use with the cell activator. That's the best way, because you have examples, concrete examples of people being successful. If you don't have that, then a matte paint is generally going to be what you want to choose. You want to choose one that's of a heavier pigment, and I'll link in the description below and up here on the screen a tool that I put together that guesstimates, and I say guesstimates because I don't know what else is in all these paints, but based on what they tell me the primary pigments in the paints are, I guesstimate how dense that paint is. So you want a higher density paint to create cells. You want a paint that is generally satin, not fully matte, but generally on the satin side. You want a little bit higher quality paint. The lower quality paints, there are a few exceptions obviously, but the lower quality paints are going to give you less good results. And then you want to make sure you're using a thinner consistency of paint. The thicker the paint is, the less cells you're going to get. The thinner the paint is, the more. And there's this delicate balance. When you get the paint too thin, you get cells when it's wet, but then they disfigure and they kind of go away when it's dry. But if you get the right consistency, then those cells form and they stay. So just based on this test, the Liquitex Basis Ivory Black looks like it's going to be a pretty good cell activator. The Amsterdam Oxide Black is a great cell activator. Creative Inspirations, not so much. The Craftsmart paint, absolutely not. And again, pull those levers. Quality of paint, the sheen of the paint. I think satin actually works the best if you can find that. The density of the pigments. And then obviously look at what has worked in the past for other people. So another thing to note is the other colors, like I mentioned, didn't really sell very much, and that has been my experience with most of the paints from this My Paints kit. It's just not a very good cell activator, just because paints that get used to make them shimmery, the mica that gets used to make them shimmery or pearlescent, generally makes that paint really, really light, and the lighter paint can move up through the heavier paint that you blow over it, and that generally helps stimulate cells. Now, for those of you struggling to get a good Dutch pour, or a pour where you use the hair dryer to move the paint around, this is the video you should watch next.